And welcome to another episode of Psych Talk. And in this podcast, we'll be discussing rather an interesting topic in the realm of psychology because it's a topic that we hardly really relate to in terms of the workplace. Now we are really honored today to have in our studio today, or in our virtual studio, we're honored to really to have someone that's really an expert in this field. He's someone that's pursuing his education and extending his education, especially studying the realms of what IO psychology is, which is industrial organizational psychology, and his work in the field and his work in research as something that if we're being honest, as a group and as a psychological society, it's something that really expands on in terms of our depth and realms of understanding here. So, Alfred, now thank you for being here, man. How are you today?
I'm good, and thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
yeah.
Tanaka.
For for a lot of people that don't know, Alfred and I actually go way back, man. those days when we were running around the ground in field to primary school.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think a lot of people know that. Our dads too also share like a profession, because they were both in media, and
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it
yeah,
was
man.
really
But,
good.
but, man, but it's really amazing to hear, just how far you've gone. And for most of our viewers who aren't aware of Alfred, he's currently overseas at the moment. Alfred, would you care to explain to our viewers where you are exactly? Yeah.
Yeah. So right now I'm in Provo, Utah, in the United States, and I moved up here with my wife so that she could pursue her education. But we were also, so I'm also pursuing mine as well, and so it's interesting to experience like the new societies and things like
Yeah.
that, and interact with people that we usually don't or wouldn't
You,
interact with. Yeah.
and I just wanted to ask, man, because the journey itself, because you are also a a product of USP as well, and
Oh yeah.
you've had your experience as well, like in higher education back home, and then jumping to higher education in a different country. Like, what was the experience like for you, man?
Yeah, it was definitely a different experience, because in USP we always laid back. We get to Talma with our friends. We always like to sit back, especially with our Pacifica culture. We like to sit back a bit, and over here, like the biggest thing that I needed to learn, that my wife was teaching me, because she had come up here first and she had already experienced that, was to ask questions, to always put yourself out there, because um, they like the different cultural differences with how in over here, if you're not asking questions or you're not making eye contact, sometimes they think, oh no, this guy's doing something, he doesn't, yeah, he's scared or things like that. But in our culture, that's you're not supposed to be, not supposed to, but it's not expected that you look at the person in the eye, especially if she's an elder or he's an elder. Yeah, so it was
Yeah,
interesting.
man.
Yeah.
And just to speak on that, it's a real for those people, for a lot of our viewers, and for people that are listening in that do experience what it's like to be in other cultures, especially Western cultures, like that issue on eye contact, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've had a few experiences here myself, man. When I'm talking to someone and he's like my professor, and I can't, like, I'm still doing the traditional thing where I'm not looking at them, and yeah, there's always that difference. But in terms of like what it was like in the university life, like how different was it? How was the experience like for you?
It was, I think it was and it still is amazing, because you get the opportunity to talk to people that we have different life experiences, we have different backgrounds, and so to talk to them and to converse, and especially with topics, because over here, because I'm from the Pacific, anything Pacific related, they think that I'm an expert. They, oh, what do you think about what's happening in
Yeah.
Samoa and Tonga? I say, oh, and I got to make up things and stuff, or I got to research more so that I'm more prepared, for
Yeah,
next
yeah.
time. But yeah, I just love it, and then it's interesting to see that they value our input as well, yeah, because that's something that we think, we like to limit our like ourselves. We do self-limiting thoughts and things like that that come in, and so to know that they value what our viewpoints are, it's really freeing, liberating.
Yeah, and from what I understand, there's also a big Fijian community there in Utah. Yeah.
Or Yeah, I think that's something that I love about Utah is that we have such a well. It's not as big as in California, but the people that we do have here, it's a close knit community, and we're always looking out for each other. We have people around the same age that my wife went to school with, and then who have children that are around the same age as mine. So I love that, having that
Yeah,
community.
yeah. It's almost like it's a semblance or like a remnant of our life back home in comparison to what it is there.
Yeah, definitely not as much playing in the
Yeah.
streets and stuff, but everything else is. It's almost the same as being at home.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to hear that you're having like there's a lot of support around you there, man. Because, say for example, like there's a lot of like people here that are coming in as seasonal workers, and then one thing that when you communicate with them, a lot of times the common theme amongst them is that there's a sense of isolation because there's such a difference in lifestyle because back home you can if you wanted to talk to someone, you just ring your cousin or he's probably down the street or something, and then you just go talk to them. But the lifestyle is very different. Yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
And I wanted to because one thing that really interested me and probably the biggest reason why we wanted you on the podcast is because of your area of research. Like you've really dived into a topic that it's sort of like a very specific topic in terms of psychology, but at the same time it's a very needed discussion and a very needed area of expertise. Now, I just wanted to understand, like, what made you get into like this field? Like, what was the events that sort of led up to you taking up industrial organizational psychology?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, like you said, I went to Kyoto with you, and so I played sports. I played rugby, and I always had some leadership roles. And then, I started to try. I got into my mind. I tried to understand what I could do better as a leader. And then when I went to high school, so I went to Queen Victoria School. The best school there is in Fiji. Yeah? But but it was very fun. I don't know why you're laughing. I think that's the truth.
Sure, man.
Yeah. But over there it's all about trying to become a leader. They prepare you to go into public service, which I didn't. I'm going more into the private sector, but in there it was very formative in that I was getting leadership roles, but I was trying to understand how the psyche was. And so after I left Queen Victoria School, after having that, where I started to question why I was making decisions and things like that. When I went to USP, I first went to USP for marine biology because I was a science student, and then I was thinking, I don't really think that I'm interested in this, and so I moved to business. So my undergraduate degree, I got a double major in human resources and public administration, which isn't the typical psychology route that you would go. But it was because I realized that I was interested in how businesses worked. I was interested in how leaders made decisions, why they made that certain decision, how the organization was affected by those decisions, and then how the employees took it. But I didn't know that there was something called organizational psychology or industrial organizational psychology. And so after I finished my degree, which took me a while because then I went into the military. So I spent a couple of years in the military, and then it was through there that those thoughts started to solidify, crystallize, because I started to think about how the decisions of the leaders of the leaders in that organization affected everyone. Not just that organization, but its output to the society. And so when I went back to school and I finished my degree, I knew I wanted to get into a more the psychological aspect of business, and then I found out that that was essentially industrial organizational psychology or business psychology. And then so, industrial organization psychology is such a long name, yeah, but so there's two different sides to that psychology. Industrial psychology is mostly focused on work processes, how to make it more efficient, make it more so that would be more like human resources management. So it's focusing on processes, it's focusing on efficiency within the organization. And then organizational psychology is focused more on individual differences. So how the person thinks, how the person feels, how that affects their work output. And the thing I liked about organizational psychology or IO psychology in general is that its focus isn't just on making the organization better in terms of just we're focusing only on the employer side. With IO psychology, we're focusing on both sides. We're focusing on trying to make sure that the employee is getting the support that he or she needs. They're getting the all the basic things, the pay, they're getting promotions and things like that, but also emotional support, managerial support, the support of their peers. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a more efficient organization, but in a holistic way, focusing on both organizations, the employers, and then the employees, and then how both those different sides, how their outputs can affect the society in general.
Wow, and it's such a holistic way of seeing things, like, really, because I mean, for people that are probably watching this podcast and people that have been in managerial roles, like, there's always been that sense of like trying to relate to employees, but at the same time, there's always been such a focus on just performance and meeting certain deadlines and meeting certain marks in terms of production, and like this understanding. I'm just curious because how does, like, if you were to, in a perfect world, like if say back home, like IO psychology, if you were to implement that in a realistic sense, like what do you think would be the positive, what do you think would be the positives that would yield from that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, well, first, like at home in Fiji, we have so much potential, but it's not realized because first of all, like trying to put people in the right roles, like the person job fit or person organization fit. Sometimes we're only focusing on how the employee can yield the results that we want, when instead if we have a more holistic approach to things, the employee won't only yield higher results than you would expect, but they'll also be more they'll become loyal to the organization. In a world where we're only living by contracts, gone are the days where you knew that you'd have lifelong employment. With a holistic approach, the employee will become so loyal that they become brand ambassadors, and their output is already higher than what it would be if they weren't being taken care of. But they'll also become brand ambassadors. They'll be telling their families, "Oh, this organization is so good. This organization takes care of me. I feel heard. I feel seen." And so, when that happens, production, national production will increase. And we could do away with. We could actually eradicate a lot of issues that are work related. And then, if we think about it, a third of our lives are spent once we've reached adulthood. A third of our lives is spent at work. And so, if we better the conditions at work, and people have better experiences at work, then that 1/3 of your life is going to also affect the other two, because then 1/3 of your life is at work, 1/3 of your life is resting, sleeping, and then so it's all it all
Connects.
connects. It's
Yeah.
all interconnected. Yeah, and if we're not focusing as much on one aspect of life, then that's when things start escalating. It starts cascading from one aspect into another, and then that's where things start going
Yeah,
off.
yeah, and you see that a lot in, especially in like high performing jobs as well. There's always a sense of imbalance in, like, if you're performing really well in one particular area, there's always an area that's diminished. And I think, and I have to commend you because your research area is like such an important uh, criteria, of such an important component of research, especially to local understanding, like in local understanding on how our understanding is of how these things work, like jobs and work. Now, for our viewers, Alfred's thesis in his area that he's actually researching in is on work-life conflict and life crafting and job satisfaction. Now, I just wanted to understand, like, what was the inspiration behind this, and if you could just talk a bit more about your research area and your thesis.
Yeah, definitely. So this whole research is something that I was facing myself, or I had personally seen myself. So, like I said, I was in the military, and so in the military, you can definitely see these things at work. Work-life conflict. So work-life conflict is when we talk about domains. So, like I was saying, like a 1/3 of your life is at work and 1/3 is at home. So those are domains. So life domain is when you're outside of work. So life in general, when you're at home, when you're with your friends, when you're with your family, and then the work domain is when you're at work. And so work-life conflict is when your roles or what you're doing at home, or what you're expected to do at home and what you're expected to do at work clash. And so when that clashes, when there's a conflict in those two domains, or whichever domains they are, your satisfaction decreases in general. Yeah. And so at work, and I focus specifically on job satisfaction. So satisfaction at work, that decreases significantly. It's a well-known topic in IO psychology. That's a topic I think that's one of the most like it's always been there. It's one of the pillars of IO psychology. It's one of the reasons that this field itself was created. It was because they wanted to understand how your roles at work and at home, or when they clash, how does it affect job satisfaction. And so in the military, you could always see it. There's always decreased morale. There's always decreased camaraderie because the job satisfaction was decreasing. Yeah? And this aspect of life crafting, it was something that came. It's a fairly recent concept. It was formed around 2016, 2018 by conceptualized by researchers. And life crafting is just trying to find meaning, or trying to craft your work or your life, and it's more holistic. So it's not just trying to create meaning or purpose in work, but also in life, and in when you want to have your leisure time, and all of that. And so I was trying to see how trying to create purpose in life can affect, or can moderate. So could it decrease the negative effects that work-life conflict has on job satisfaction?
Now, it's always because we as a people, sometimes we have this idea that we have to sort of compartmentalize things. Like, there's work that stays at work, and then there's home that stays at home, and then there's different components. So we sort of box things into their different boxes because it seems to be easier to deal with. But then what you propose is that these things are very much interrelated.
Yeah, definitely. And in an ideal world, we'd be like robots. At work, it's all in a nice neat box, and then your things at home, it's a nice neat box. But in the real world, all of these things are all interrelated. It's all connected. A perfect example was if I was to try and explain this in a term that I think all the viewers could understand is, you did one of your episodes was with Dr. Galen Osborne, yeah, and with her thesis, it was on the sevens team, the sevens team, and how what was the biggest impacts
that impacts performance,
impact areas, in performance, and so with performance, what she found out was that it was pay, it was the thought of not getting paid, because then that would affect their home life, that would affect their families, because they're playing for their country, and this was going on, and that's a perfect example. If we were in that ideal world, whatever they did at work, just work, don't think about what's happening at home, your training, don't think about your family not getting fed, and that's hard, because we're all human, and that's something that happens. And so this a perfect example is with for this is with Dr. Galen's thesis, where she, the sevens team, they were worried about how the pay impacted their families, but if you see their performance, they're one of the best sevens teams in the world, and that's because they were creating purpose. They were trying to create meaning within their life, and it's a multifaceted relationship between work-life conflict and job satisfaction. And creating meaning isn't the only solution to this, but it's one of those things that you could use within that relationship to try and moderate it, try and find more balance within trying to focus on work, but also trying to thinking about home.
Yeah, and it's crazy that you bring up that example, because I mean, we as a country, I think we're all still recovering from that loss, from the England loss, and but the sense of passion that came around it, it was really like a spectacle, and the boys did create history by making the quarterfinals. But there was also a key point. I mean, those unfortunate events that happened with the families of Tuikoro and Joshua Tuikoro and Sam Matavesi, and these things, like, these were all home situations, but then they had like a very big impact. But in your view, like, how did you view that whole situation?
Yeah, and that was a really great example. Joshua Tuikoro, him and I played against each other in Ratanabu.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Always been that. In the Deans, But he's one of those players that you think he's untouchable, and then you hear about how he lost his son. That's an example of how you're trying to focus on the work at hand, but then a family situation affects your performance. But and the same with Sam Matavesi. But then if you follow the team, like, one of the things that they would always hashtag is Ubuntu. I am because of my standing in society, and that Ubuntu. I'm trying to find the word. So having Ubuntu, that Ubuntu, that was like their call sign, for the whole team. Ubuntu, that's purpose. That was their purpose for playing in the competition. They weren't doing it just for themselves. They were doing it for their families. They were doing it for the nation. They were doing it for each other. And so that purpose, if you see, Tuikoro and Matavesi, they were able to perform at that level still because they had a sense of purpose. They were, if anything, they had more to fight for. Sam Matavesi to honor his father, and then Tuikoro to giving, dedicating that game to his son. Those are things that, and I think that was a really great job by the head coach Simon Revolui, by taking them to Taviuni. That was because by that he was driving in home the purpose, the reason why this team was playing. They were playing for the people. In provincial rugby, they always when they have camps, they're doing their camps in villages because it's to show the players that they're not playing for themselves, they're playing for the provinces, the people within that province. And by taking them to Tabuni, he was showing them that their purpose wasn't to play for themselves. They weren't there to make more money when they go back to their clubs. They were there to play for the people, and they were there to see how the people, the passion of the nation was there for them to see and for them to take in and to and to find that
Yeah,
Ubuntu.
yeah.
Yeah? And
Yeah,
yeah,
and I have to really say that they did an amazing job. Like there was, I mean, that game against Australia, that was really something special. I think I was in my dorm room and I had to my Ari had to come and like tell me to to actually like keep it up because I was screaming at the top of my
yeah,
voice. Yeah, but yeah, I'm just so proud of how much the boys, how well the boys did, and they've been great ambassadors for the sport and for the country. Yeah,
amen,
and
amen.
but I just want to draw back on that whole purpose thing, the purpose, what you were explaining, and how the coach did such an amazing job of driving home that there's a sense of purpose, but there's really a sense of identity within that purpose, like finding that sort of connection with that purpose, and then driving that home, so that actually makes them more more inclined to do work that at such a high level. Now, in your understanding and in your studies, like how much does purpose play in the whole motivation of how everyone is at the workplace, and what are some of the things that you sort of found out?
Yeah, definitely. Like if you think about um, the culture, the work culture here, well, not the work culture, but the culture in the US, entrepreneurship is something that's really big. They created the iPhone. They created Apple, they created Google, and all those different founders, those different creators. For example, Steve Jobs. You know, that was something that drove them to excellence, the purpose. They talk about how Steve Jobs was such a great leader, again, which is something that we like to study in IO psychology. He was such a great leader because he was always driving home the purpose of Apple. So I don't know if you know the story about Steve Jobs, but he created Apple. He founded Apple with Steve Wozniak, and then they did so much. They did so great in the beginning, and then there were a couple of product flaws that happened, and it didn't exceed the expectations that the board had for them, and so Steve had to step back. And when he stepped back, that was a period when Apple was creating subpar products. They were creating things that wasn't really in the essence of why the company was created in the first place. And then they brought Steve back, and when they brought him back, he came back and he drove home the purpose of Apple, the purpose of the organization as a whole. And when that happened, that's when all these innovations started to come in. The Macintosh, the first iPhone. So before the first iPhone, the iPods, and those were things that not only changed the organization as a whole, but it changed the world. Before Steve Jobs came back, no one thought that you could put 1,000 songs into a small device and then carry it around. You're still going Walkman and things like that. And so by finding purpose, that is something that we every organization needs, and every single individual needs to have in order to have satisfaction, job satisfaction, in order to always. If you don't have purpose, when you wake up in the morning, you don't want to go to work. You want to just pull that blanket on and lay down. But by having purpose, it drives the individual, it drives the organization, and that organization as a whole, if it has purpose, it creates innovation that drives society, it drives the world forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you speak about that because there's been some movement. There's been some movement back home in trying to create like that sense of because you mentioned something about entrepreneurship and purpose being like a really strong, almost like a predisposition towards like being successful as an entrepreneur. Now, because your interests lie in like business and how things, how motivating people is such an important factor. Now, in terms of the local culture at home and what because there's been programs like the Yes program. They've been trying to push
Mm.
all these avenues in these programs to try and increase that role of entrepreneurship. Like, what do you think? What's your view on the whole thing in terms of the local scene?
Definitely, and I'm glad you talked about, you're trying to direct the question to the local scene, because with everything it's always about context. It's always about finding the what needs to be done within that context. And at home, I think a lot of these new these entrepreneurial directions, it's always going towards something that I also believe in, and that's climate change. Trying to focus on waste and how to minimize that, and that's purpose in itself. When if you have a greater purpose than yourself, and that's when you start to do things, intentional, taking intentional steps to create an organization that focuses on that purpose. So, for example, I think there's always a drive by fashion.
Yeah.
Fashion is one of the biggest contributors to waste there. And there's a lot of organizations that are getting started. In Fiji, Fiji Fashion Week, I've seen fashion designers that are creating products to minimize waste. That's a purpose in itself. And if we can get behind those organizations, there's you know we can start creating innovations, ideas, innovative ideas that won't only impact our small country. It'll also impact the region. Once those ideas start getting formulated with a purpose in mind, that's when we can create amazing things. And our like I said, our people, we have so much potential. We have so much that we can give to the world after we start breaking those barriers of self-doubt and self-limitations and things like that. And that's what I think. Once you have that purpose, that's when you'll have the confidence to start breaking through, breaking those glass ceilings, breaking those self limitations, to actually you know get to where you want to, where you can um, produce products or produce the results that you want to help the world become a better place.
Yeah, and it's such an amazing point because I've seen these small time businesses, that these small startup businesses. A few years back, I think it was around 2018 or 2019. I'm not sure what year it was. Yeah, we were part of this program where the government was sort of like identified 30 people that were under the age of 30, and then I got to meet like some of these people that were like young entrepreneurs. And there was this one guy.
Nice.
So there's this one guy that was involved in bee horticulture, like not horticulture, but rather beekeeping. But his methods of using
Mm.
it was 100% sustainable. And I think his company at the moment is, man, I need to Google what his company name is, but his company at the moment is really like, it's making waves, and it's sort of becoming like a trend setting. They've become trendsetters in a way, in terms of like what exactly to do to minimize waste, but also at the same time increase production. And yeah, it's these are I think these are the real directions, that like these are the directions that we ought to go, and it's really yielding some positive results. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
definitely.
now I remember we were talking earlier about some of your other areas of research, like how you've also worked with the Rotary International, and how
Yeah.
you looked into mostly creating project teams and by identifying team roles. And now I just for our viewers, like what was the work that you were doing then, like how did it sort of come about?
Yeah, definitely. So Just one day I was randomly trying to find research teams, so I just went on the internet like everybody else when you're trying to find the solution to something, and then I got in contact with, I think, someone that I believe is one of my mentors. His name's Dr. Steve Atkins. He's based in Otago Polytech, and then he had a research team that I jumped onto, and they were researching how, so Rotary International is one of the biggest non-profit organizations. They give funds to project teams to do all sorts of things, humanitarian aid kind of things. And so we work specifically with WASH. So the WASH task force is water, sanitation, and hygiene. So they go to third world countries, they go to regions that need help, and they build wells, they build things that so like pipes. They lay down pipes, they create water systems for people that are in need, communities that are in need. What they found out was that a lot of these teams, so most of the funding is done for 5 years, for a 5-year project. Most of these teams, after year 3, they were dissolving because the people couldn't work together. And if you think about these teams, these project teams, they are most likely comprised of specialists. Someone that's a hydrologist, someone that's a specialized plumber, someone that is chemical engineer, and their different personalities didn't work together. They didn't mesh well together. And when they didn't mesh well together, they started to have conflict. And then with conflict, comes the inevitable end where they would dissolve. And when they dissolved at year 3, Rotary couldn't, they can't fund another team to finish those last 2 years. And so that was money wasted on projects that didn't
achieve their target.
Near completion. They achieved their target. And so what we found was that there's something that, so because IO psychology is relatively new, we pulled concepts, and we pulled ideas and theories from different types of psychological fields. And one of the areas that we pulled from was social psychology. And with social psychology, or even psychology in general, there's something called individual differences. Everyone is different. They have different personalities, they have different mindsets, they have different psyches. What we found is that with personality traits, and something that we focused on with Dr. Steve Atkins, is personality traits can be used to try and find out what type of team member you are. So what we found out was there is a well researched area called team member traits, team membership, and that was created by someone that Dr. Belbin. And Dr. Belbin had this theory that certain types of people have certain types of team roles. There are people that are leaders, there are people that are strategists, there are people that like to take lead, like to take action. And so when you have a well-balanced team with those team roles, if you have a well-balanced team, you're able to accomplish your tasks, but also do it with high results, high-level results. And so what we found was that with we were trying to figure out whether we could identify those team roles before by looking at how the individual's personality traits, how their personality traits could predict what type of team member they were. And we were trying to get use that research and those findings to then implement a section. So when every project team comes, when they apply for the funding, we insert this questionnaire to see whether those team members, so when they come and apply, they've already got their team members, they've already got them aligned, they've curated people that they want to have in the team. So when they apply for the funding, then they would undergo this psych eval, so that we could find out whether this team would be able to finish that 5-year project. And so it's an ongoing research project, and we're also looking at trying to find out whether this, because we're focusing on humanitarian work, yeah. But we're trying to what Dr. Steve Atkins is saying is that we could, if we could verify that this is this is for real, this is a legit kind of psych eval, we could take that and then go into other fields that have project teams that come in. And so one of the Dr. Steve Atkins, he was in the United States Air Force, and he was part of the space cadre before they started to make before they made the Space Force, yeah. And so he was saying, if we can verify that within the humanitarian field, that could be applied into fields like space. So space teams. So when they come in, they bring in engineers. They bring in those specialists to build those rockets, or they bring specialists to go on those space flights. If we can find out whether predicting team roles by looking at their personality traits is something that can work, then that could definitely be used in other fields that are similar, with space flights, with humanitarian work, and even with project teams in at home. If we're trying to go for long-term tours, with the military, we go for tour of duties in the Middle East, and if we can find out whether those teams will be able to work together for that 1 year deployment, then all well and good, and we can start really focusing on how to make the teams better and how to make putting the right type of people in the right roles. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's such an interesting point to make, because I feel like there is a sense of, and I don't know if it's just because we just haven't practiced it back home, because I think like avenues like that, and having these sorts of personality traits and all these tests, it could be really useful in actually like dealing with certain things, especially in mostly the public and private sector, because the public and private sector, they do operate in teams as well, especially when it's in terms of a project and stuff. How do you think those, like, say, if you were to apply that in terms of, let's say, something in the public sector or something, like, how do you think that would translate in the local context?
Yeah, definitely. So with the local context, we have this, MOUs, where different organizations, different departments, they have this agreement that when something happens, they could formulate a task force to focus specifically on that. One example is with disaster management. With disaster management, we have that national committee that works on trying to strategically plan for when these disasters come. DISMAC, yeah. So with DISMAC is a compilation of different organizations. There's the military that comes in, the maritime affairs, and some others. I think, the Red Cross and St. John, and then they have like logistical organizations that also are part of it. And so when we create task force, if we can find out the team roles that suits different individuals, then those task force are more likely to come up with innovative ideas that could save lives in times of disasters. If cyclones come in, if we have only one, like a certain type of individual, like this whole team is just made up of the same type of individual, that's when groupthink happens. That's when people just start, when they start agreeing with each other, then they'll come up with only limited ideas. They'll all think the same thing. There's only one solution for this problem. When you have groups that have different personality traits, they have different team roles, that group is more likely to come up with more innovative ideas. They're more likely to come up with 3 or 4 other solutions to that group that only came up with one. And then those other solutions not only could address that one question, but it could address related questions or related scenarios that the first group didn't think about. And That's exactly what we want to focus on. We want to have teams that are well balanced. We want to have teams that have different individuals with different types of perspectives and mindsets that could create a more holistic approach to certain to questions. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny that you bring that up because I mean an interesting point that you made there was the one on groupthink, because there's always particular like similar personality traits with members of the group. Now, and I just got to thinking, because we as a culture we are very communal in itself, and we sort of do adopt group thinking in a sense, because we've always sort of like been together, and it's very different from Western cultures where people are very individualized in how they think. Like there are independent thinkers in Fiji, but like say for example in the grassroots community, it's always there's always a decision that's made by the elder, and then people just sort of have like an agreeable nature to it, and that's it. It's really part of the culture, and it sort of stems from our ability to be very respectful and to always just be. It's not necessarily being passive, but also it's just working together, because we're always in that sense. Now, how in that realm of understanding in terms of culture, and how sometimes we have that group think, like how do you think there could be ways where we could retain our individuality, like how we can be individual thinkers but at the same time be very like not as like different, have so much differences in how we think, and that could cause like conflict and stuff. But how do you think that culture and the that concept of groupthink, how do you think that plays a part in itself? Do they correlate, or?
Yeah, definitely, and I think like they definitely correlate, and I think it's a negative correlation because, and I think the first thing that we gotta think about is, and that's something that you pointed out or you alluded to, is that our communities, because it's so communal, sometimes we don't have a collaborative environment, and that I think is the first step that we need to take. We need to create environments that that are conducive to people, speaking out, people feeling safe to bring ideas forth, and so I think one concept, and that's something that I believe, like we think about collaborative ideas, collaborative environments. That's a Western concept. What we have in our culture is we have this concept, and I got this from Mr. Simeon Sebundendre, is something called Wirong-Rongodi, or Talno, Talno and Wirong-Rongodi. They are aspects of the same thing, They are, so with Talno, the basis of Talno is that it's a collaborative environment. You have the opportunity to share what your thoughts are, and then one part of that is Wirong-Rongodi. You have the opportunity to share what you wanted to share, and then you take a step back and you allow the people that you just shared to, for them to share their thoughts. And then in that collaborative environment with Talnoa, in the center of that, that's when we're able to minimize groupthink. We can continue to be respectful, but we can respectfully give our ideas, our solutions, and that starts with the elders. The elders, we need our elders need to create that environment first. But if they don't, then it's harder, but it can still be done, where we are doing a bottom-up change within our communities. Just like what you said, like with groupthink, like in a perfect example of groupthink is every time we do a community, we're trying to fundraise as a community, the first thing we think about, solely, almost everything solely. When in fact we could, and you can see it now, even with communities now, they have, when they're trying to fundraise, they've done alternative, strategies, approaches. they have where the youth are planting food now, and and they're selling ginger, they're selling, instead of doing solely, they're now working together as a community to create revenue streams with agriculture or with other
Yeah.
things, yeah. And I think that's a positive. That's something that you can see
Yeah.
certain
Yeah.
changes, and hopefully that can spread out more, to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
nation as a
and
whole.
it's amazing because we already sort of have like those templates that are in place, like the Virurodi and the Talanoa, all these certain things, and a huge thing, like I believe that a huge thing in terms of like actually relating the things that we learn and bringing it to our culture and bringing it to our context is always it's really important, because at the same time as we are like expanding our learning, there's always, you have to be able to contextualize it, and I know that you do some great work in Pacifica research, right, with Dr. Beth Paraga. Yeah. What was,
Yeah, Dr.
yeah,
Elizabeth, yeah.
yeah, Elizabeth, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Dr. Elizabeth Kutre Paraga.
Yeah. What was that like? Because I know that she's that the work that you guys do is it's really built upon culturally adapted strategies. And what was that like for you guys in terms of like your work together? What were some of the things that you learned from her? I mean,
Yeah, definitely.
she. I mean, her work it really stands out for itself, and you being able to work with her, it's really, so must have been something special.
Yeah, and I like to give credit to my wife, because she jumped onto that project group first, and then she, being the good wife that she pulled me into it, and working with Dr. Elizabeth Kutre Paraga is that it's crazy, because she's bringing in and like Western strategies, but she's localizing it. She's making it more culturally relevant. A lot of her research is on how to how to teach social and emotional regulation to children. And so she's already done research in American Samoa, where she had her students in university at the Brigham Young University. They created books that had American Samoan characters, and those books talked about social and emotional regulation, so that they could teach children. And that's something that I think we as Pacifica we need help in that area of talking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
emotions, talking about how we can interact socially, because in our societies we always taught to not
Yeah, to internalize everything.
to be
Yeah,
more respectful,
yeah,
just yeah, and internalize everything. And so one of the things that she talked about, so in the US they have something like cutting the watermelon. That's a breathing exercise, a breathing technique that children can use to calm down, and regulate the emotions, and understand what
yeah.
they're feeling. That cutting the watermelon, when they went to American Samoa, they found out that the children were they were they liked that idea, but they wanted to associate it with cutting coconuts, cutting the coconut, sharing the coconut. And so that breathing technique from the Western, it's a
Yeah,
Western strategy, but then they localized it by focusing on things that the children could relate to,
yeah,
coconuts
yeah.
instead of watermelons. In American Samoa, one of their drinks of choice is coco Samoa, the
Cool.
Samoan
Yeah,
cocoa. And so instead of talking about blowing the hot chocolate in America, when they went to Western American Samoa, they talked about blowing coco Samoa, trying to work on breathing and things like that. And those are things that, those are techniques and those are strategies which researchers, when they come to the Pacific, those are things that they should think about. And I'm glad that Dr. Elizabeth Kutreparaga, how she's already taken taken that step. She's leading the charge with those things, creating bringing strategies and then contextualizing it so that it's specific to the cultures of those nations that they're doing research in. Yeah, like one of the things like we talked about was internalizing your emotions. You're not supposed to be talking about how you feel and things like that. The children in American Samoa, they when they were asked about anger, they said, "Oh, anger is bad." And then after they had undergone these techniques, these strategies of emotional regulation, they realized that anger is not bad. It's just you just gotta you just gotta know how to work through it, so that you can interact sociably with people,
Yeah.
your parents, your peers, and things like that. They learned that emotions aren't bad. It's something that's natural and something that we can work on, so that we can have better relationships with people. And this research, she's also trying to bring that research to Fiji, and I'm excited about that, because then by bringing it to Fiji, we can understand, we can see how our youth, our future leaders, how they are already trying to work through emotional regulation and social regulation. And once they undergo this, whether it'll have a better effect on how we as a nation regulate our emotions, and our social relationships and things like that.
Yeah, I honestly can't wait for it, because I think it's such a, like, having that be a discussion point and having that be like a topic where we have minds from Fiji and such a great man like Dr. Elizabeth Kotraparaga, like having that sort of like that dialogue and creating that channel of dialogue, because I mean. You know it well, because we're
Excuse me.
around the same age for like when we were younger.
I'm a bit older, but you don't have to
just just
not to
by
get
yeah,
dated or anything. Yeah, just that's okay.
yeah, it's we've always had this we've always had such difficulty in terms of like expression and being able to
Mm.
communicate openly about how we felt at certain points, and having these discussions now, I feel like this really is a doorway into like having that sort of like emotional intelligence to be able to communicate things effectively. And man, I'm really looking forward to this, man, because there's always been, like, as a culture, we've always been very respectful. Like, we've always valued family. We have so many great traits about our culture, and there's always been value on family. There's always been value on community and building relationships with others. But there's always been that area that we can improve on in terms of like
Mm.
being openly expressive about emotions such as anger and emotions such as sadness, because we have like these different levels of coping, and we have like these different methods of coping, like and I feel like these are the conversations that should be had. Yeah. And
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I just wanted to say, like, with these types of researches, I think one of our societal issues or community issues that we can that could address directly is domestic
yeah,
violence.
yeah,
That's something that's always on the rise, especially in Fiji. We value families, we value communities, but if we aren't able to regulate our emotions, we aren't able to understand why we're feeling this way, or how we can control those
yeah,
emotions.
yeah.
That's when domestic violence continues to rise. That's one of the I think is one of the biggest contributors to
Oh
that
yeah, yeah, for
issue.
sure, for sure. There's always been like like one of the predispositions towards like violent outbursts and stuff is mostly the inability to process like these emotions, and it's always built and it stems from different ways of understanding. There's always different ways of trying to communicate, and we always have this there's always people that are like less capable of communicating emotions, when then and sadly it sort of results in that, in those areas, and results to those violent outbursts. But having these sorts of discussions, like being having that emotional intelligence and learning that from a young age, because her work really stems from working with the younger generation. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
this is I feel like this is like a real perfect opportunity, because, and I really hope that we, as the society, we can like try and get to meet her when she does come around. Yeah.
Yeah, and like just like you said, like her work is on children, but we're not a lost cause. Yeah? Even though we're older, we can also take
Exactly.
from these lessons, and try and work on it ourselves. I grew up in, in in those days where we weren't we didn't talk about emotional regulations, and I'm just glad that I was able to work through these things by myself and with my wife, and yeah, I've come a long way from, I'm an introvert and all these things, and I feel that I've come a long way in working through my
Yeah.
emotions, and still trying to communicate effectively, even when I'm having all these different things
Oh
going
man,
on.
oh man, but you've done an amazing job so far, man. You've been really communicative
Yeah,
today, man.
we'll see, we'll see.
Oh man, but I just like to I just before we end, because we're already on the hour mark. This is such an interesting conversation, but
Definitely,
I'm
yeah.
we're already close
No,
to
you're
the
good.
end here. But I just wanted to understand, like, your inspiration. Like, what was the inspiration behind, um, what sort of drives you? Because a lot of our viewers, they're probably hearing from you for, like, hearing you speak, and listening to the things that you say, and listening to your understanding on how work and family life conflict and everything. Like, what are some of the things that you find were some of your driving factors?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the first and the biggest driving factor was, I wanted to work on myself. Like one of the gags, the running gags is that, the the reason someone goes into psychology is because they need a psychologist, and that's the same for me. Like, I wanted to understand how I could become a better leader, how I could become a better product of, you know, become a better person, and how I could contribute to society. And then, on that's a segue into my second biggest motivation is that, I want to be able to contribute to building our society, our culture, our nation, and our region. Like I said, I believe that we have so much potential, and one of those areas that I think we can definitely work on is, working on building more efficient organizations, building um, better employees by looking after them, taking care of them. And that was one of the reasons I went into organizational psychology, because I wanted to help. I wanted to make an impact in an area that I think we have so much potential in, but we haven't realized it. And I believe that businesses, Fiji Water is one of the biggest brands out there in the world. That's an
Yeah.
example of a local product that has international
Yeah. Yeah.
presence, and I believe that we have so much more that we can work on. I also believe that, as a society, we can do better in not only creating better businesses, but creating better individuals, creating better leaders, not just in business but in the public sector, in the communities that we come from, in the families that we
Yeah.
have. Leadership and family is the basic social unit of our society, especially with Pacific cultures. And by working and understanding how we can create leaders in business, that those takeaways, those lessons can also be implemented at home. And my belief is that if we all contribute to building better leaders, leaders of tomorrow, then not only will our businesses thrive, but our societies and our families will also thrive, and then it'll contribute to the rise of the Pacific as a region, and our contributions within our families and within our societies will also create a better world. A better world for our the generation that's coming in, our children and their children. And those were the few things that motivated me to continue with my studies until go into IO psychology. And I just hope that what I take in and the knowledge that I gain from this, I'll be able to disseminate it. I'll be able to pass it on to anyone that wants to become a better employee, employer, leader, family man, family woman, and a better citizen of Fiji.
Thank you. So that's very well put, Alfred. That was it's really good to hear what your inspiration is, because it's it's amazing to find someone that's so driven towards mapping out something that is such an intricate part of what we are as adults, because work and home life, we don't really have that connection in terms of like putting things together and like trying to understand that it's really an interconnected process. And like speaking to you today, it's really shed light on a lot of things that we can improve on, and a lot of things that the amazing work that you're doing. And for that, I just want to thank you for your time, man. I know that it's really early in the morning that you tap it, but I'm sorry for
Thank you. Always. Good thing I'm a morning person.
I'm sorry for getting you up at 5 o'clock in the morning, man. My bad, man.
No, you're good. No, you're good. Thank you.
But anyways, man, I just want to take this time to thank you for, and we'd really love to have you again on the podcast, because I looked down and I saw that we had already gone for an hour, and I was like, oh man, we just got to the interesting part just now.
Yeah. No, you always got to leave them hanging. Try and get them coming back for more. But yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you for having me. And I'm proud of being at a place where I become a guest to this distinguished individual trying to be somewhere in the society.
Oh man, this guy, man. Yeah, but anyways, thank you very much. To our viewers, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us on our social media pages, or you can send an email in the link. But from us, Nawalebu, thank you very much, Alfred, for today. And yeah, we'll see you all. We'll see you all on the next episode. Naka. Nawalebu.
Okay.